Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. Tonight's episode is Xtreme TV. I'm your host, Rob, here with RDV. Tonight we are talking Kolchak, The Night Stalker, Season 1, Episode 19. The next to last episode in that wonderful, trend-setting 70s TV show that only ran for one season. And RDV, I got to say this right off the bat. I love this episode. We've been on kind of a high kick lately with a few episodes, despite some really bad ones. This one has Kathy Lee Thiesman, for all you Redskins fan out there. Yes, it's Kathy Lee Crosby, the lady that would go on to date Thiesman for a decade, and until she sued him because he wouldn't financially support her. And everybody knows that That's Incredible is a great show too, with the great John Davidson, Fran Tarkenton. I mean, it was a stud show way before its time with Tiger Woods and all sorts of weird stuff on it. But I got to say, RDV, this was a good episode, and we've said that the template that Kolchak follows, when it does it and does it well, it's really a great treat for a show. We've got Kolchak arguing and fighting. We got Kolchak investigating stuff. We got Kolchak at the end of the episode breaking stuff and being in the dark room, almost getting ready to die and accidentally killing whoever the bad person's going to be. In this case, it's the swinging 70s baby, and Kolchak is investigating people that seem to be dying that are all just gorgeous, beautiful people. At first, I was a little kind of about the whole setup. But as soon as the episode started, it had a very chill kind of vibe to it all. And I really dug it, if I use the 70 terms correctly. But yeah, what a good episode. What'd you think?
I liked it, like the whole supernatural kind of element to it, but also kind of historical thing. When you find out who the person is, and I love how it's like it's pretty much has to deal with people getting their youth stolen from them and then dying of a heart attack old age. So, and I love how Kolchak, basically figures this out. He's like, well, this person, there's no way this person could be like, this has to be him. He checks dental records and all that stuff. And like, this is him. And like, nobody will believe it. Like the guy who's like 26-year-old could be laying right there in the morgue, like looking 95, or 100. Yeah. And like I said, this is something you would see probably in other stuff too. We could write other shows, a case like this. Because this is right up with the kind of supernatural kind of lore thing, We always look at succubus as like, how they use sex, and that's how they steal your youth through that too. But this is different though. This is just like someone basically pledging to the Greek gods, making a sacrifice, and these people unwillingly did not know this by wearing the ring, and everything makes them a mark.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
Mark of the beast, whatever you want to call it. Hey, we're going to go get that one. Yeah. You bring up a really good point there too. And one thing we actually have not talked about in Kolchak on a bigger picture, we may dive into it a little bit with our last episode next week, is this. Typically, when you have stories, we start to understand that we've seen an episode similar to this before on something else. Star Trek 5 to 10 years early comes to mind. They've had an aging episode and other types of things. But when you consume a lot of TV and books and media, you realize that there's like moral tales. There's the hero's journey from, popularized by Joseph Campbell back in the day for people that care about that sort of thing. And to me, your viewpoint on it being historic, I think, is something very important to discuss, because with Kolchak, we don't really look necessarily at these moral tales, other than Kolchak in his epilogue there making one or two little comments into his tape that nobody's going to get. He kind of ties everything together. But this one almost felt like it too, because it was young people. They weren't doing anything wrong, but they're looking to meet other beautiful, like-minded people to have relations and have a good time. And there was no manipulation or guilt or whatever. It's just that Kathy Lee Crosby, this tall, beautiful very successful tennis player, turned model, turned star. I thought she was fantastic in here. She's a very natural beauty. She's very convincing with her acting. She's got quite the resume too. Even if you're not watching a lot of things, probably back at that time you would have seen her in something. But yeah, Kolchak goes from the apartment where people are dying. I mean, we get the body count pretty high. It's pretty cool. I mean, I thought things really picked up when the one dopey guy who pretended to be like a tennis player, I guess that was like an inside joke there, but who I think lived at home or whatever it was. He had the glass eye and fake stuff. That's where it almost went into the moral tale about, what you think you see is what you're getting, but that's not what's really there.
Yeah. I like that he had brown hair as well. We bring up Kathy Lee Crosby, who was the first Wonder Woman before, Linda Carter.
Yes. Before Linda Carter. She was in the TV movie.
Yes. And then we have Reb Brown, TV's Captain America.
Oh, good catch. Good
Yeah.
catch.
So then, because usually this is towards the end of the series. There's only one other episode after this. So, and when this came out, the Nielsen ratings for this was so low. At this point, they were ready to cancel the show. But they brought in these two people in there. It's like, and then all of a sudden, like, interest was peaked back up a little bit, But unfortunately, not enough. They actually, because they already, NBC, whoever owned it, pretty much said, like, we have one more and you're done. You're gone. So it's interesting to see that they're bringing in these these celebrity guests, and it's not the first time they've done this before too, but these were pretty much like two big household names to bring them into this.
Yes.
And at this point, I think it's just like these people just wanted to be on it before. It's like hey, let's be on the show before it goes. Maybe they were fans of the show, or maybe it was just like a fan thing. It's like, because remember, we had Eric Estrada. After that point, I felt like they're just gonna start bringing in guest stars, just try and boost ratings. That's what I felt like to me.
You're catching Kathy Lee on transitioning from an athletic career to a media career, and you had Eric Estrada before I think he even got into Chips. So they were catching a lot of people. Yeah. It was a good mix of people that were either in their prime or past their prime, but also on the upswing that we didn't know. And Chips was a very long-running, successful TV show, despite the fact that nobody probably knows what the hell it is. So here in two recent episodes dealing with social stuff of the time, modernizing what's going on. Of course, it's a supernatural kind of show here. I think was pretty good. I think you're right on about that.
We also had George Salvas, the cab driver. He's actually from Kolchak. Kelly's Heroes. He's also been in the Marcus Murders, Marcus Nelson Murders. He just played the cabbie, and I thought that was kind of cool having him in there too. And I love the interaction when he's back at the office with him, and he's just like, and Vincenzo's like, "What's going on here?" It's like, we're busy. It's like, leave us alone.
Yeah. Well, this episode, like as it starts out with a couple people dying, Kolchak's trying to figure the stuff in. Of course, there's always the story he's supposed to write. This kind of, in a roundabout way, reminds me of we've talked about in our top 10 Tuesdays here on the Xtreme Movie Show about the 80s films in particular, where I mentioned how Fletch was one of my favorite movies of the 80s, but also one of the top in 85 when it came out. The Fletch movie and the second movie were based off Fletch novels written by a gentleman named Gregory MacDonald, who was a journalist, I believe, at the time, and writer, and he's long since passed away. But his books, I think, started in the late 70s, and I always think about Kolchak, and I think of Fletch here, where you have something you're supposed to do, like Kolchak's supposed to write this dumb, boring story, but he'd rather work on something else, and that's exactly what happens in the Fletch movie. He's supposed to be doing this one story, but instead somebody, when he's undercover, asked to kill him, and so he's kind of juggling two things. And that's one thing that Darren McGavin does really well here is Kolchak is we know that we're used to seeing him having to fight his way through things. And we've talked a little bit about how there's the pissiness that he deals with government because they stonewall him at almost every case as far as getting information. But they go the opposite way in this episode because the police person he's dealing with is actually a very nice person that was from a very small town, thanked him and all that, and they shake hands, and he's beside himself. And I kind of popped when these guys started talking and shaking hands and started talking about all these murders, and they had like this bromance going on. I thought, okay, this is a little different too. We've gotten so used to seeing Kolchak kind of go through the same steps and motions. It was nice to see a little bit of a change like that, I thought.
Yeah, with the cop basically being nice to him.
Yeah, it
was until they called him a pinwheel, and he had the pinwheel thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, I know your friend.
Well, the end of the episode's interesting because the other big scene that steps out to me is the ending, and there's a setup scene where Kolchak goes to talk to one lady and do research about what it's like to join a dating club, because this is for the most part pre-computer, where you would have people come in, fill out like a questionnaire, people would match you up. You'd have to buy like monthly magazines, and some of them were called swingers magazines because, instead of just dating per se, it was like sex. It's kind of like the modern day version of Tinder, where people say, I'm only on here for a serious relationship, which, nobody believes that, and everything was a little bit more specialized at the time going on there. And so Kolchak gets ignored by all these beautiful people in there until finally the lady that is really the modern day Helen of Troy, Kathleen Crosby, talks to him. They have a nice little back and forth too, and he finds out what's going on. So he goes and he breaks into the office, not once, but twice. And at the end, he goes in there. She knows it. But right before she goes in there, it's a dark, and he's like, well, if I just break everything, she can't, perform her little spell thing and sacrifice. He goes on a rampage.
It goes back to the cab driver. The cab driver is like, well, you desecrate the place, and all they'll piss off the gods. But he's like, and he's doing it. So he's like, you idiot. It's like, and then he realized, like, that sacrifice has to be perfect. So then so once he figures that clue out and everything, he's like, he basically I love how he talks to her. She's ready to kill him. He's like, you're a fool, I'm gonna kill you, and all stuff. And he's like, well, guess what though? You already pissed off your gods though. You have an imperfect sacrifice. That guy had a glass eye, and she's like, what? No, you're lying.
She didn't even know it. No. The dude had the glass eye.
He's like, yep. She's basically turned into stone. But I love the fact you find out that she's actually Helen of Troy this whole entire time. Remember Helen of Troy, the whole story. So they actually give you like the historical background and everything. But so it's like she's been like alive because she's been stealing people's youth. So it's a spin on the story, but
it's what it does. It reminds me of, I go back to Star Trek, because the original Star Trek series, the original series TOS as it's referred to, I was always a fan of growing up as a kid. It's eminently rewatchable. A third of the episodes are fantastic, a third are and a third are really bad, right? But of course, that's where Shatner has been popularized from. He'd been in things before that, and we're talking late 60s here. But one thing that was reminded me of Kolchak here, it's kind of like taking what Star Trek was doing, where they actually had a lot of really good writers. For the most part, you can tell with the really good writing in some of the Star Trek episodes. They based a lot of their stuff off the hardcore science fiction of the time in the 50s and 60s. Not to say it's been watered down today, but it's not as commercially viable with new ideas. And so even though this Helen of Troy, this character from our past, allegedly, at least in that mythology, it gets revisited. And so, like I say, it may have seemed familiar, and hardcore fan might go, oh, Kolchak ripped off this or that. You know what, there's a lot of similarities in stories about things and desecration of temples and how gods are like babies. But growing up as a kid watching Star Trek or some things, it was always nice when a TV show presented something in adult fashion, yet there was other layers into it where, like, as a kid, you might pick up some simple pieces of information. You just go, a pretty woman ends up being bad because she's, like baby god and all that. Kolchak's the good guy, he's going to win. And so it's kind of nice to see that he almost accidentally or just intelligently somehow figures out a way to save his ass at the last minute, because he does it every episode, it seems like, doesn't it? Yeah. Good episode. A lot of fun. I can't believe there's only one more episode left in it too. But my final thoughts are this: good episode. It's one of the better ones. After episode 20, we'll talk a little bit about the show overall, what we thought, what the reality turned out to be on what we thought of Kolchak in this show. But again, I've said before that it's very hard to modernize a lot of supernatural things or horror, and in the 70s, that was a big challenge. Here you got Kolchak working in swingers condos, trying to find hit people that are willing to say, hey, man, I'll help you out. What's going on, brother? It's all love. I mean, it's good stuff. Again, we're talking about a show 45 years ago, roughly to 50, that it aired. And without it, there'd be no X-Files. There'd be probably no Twin Peaks, no Millennium, nothing since then. And this is a show that did it. And like you said, it was in a bad time slot. It was going to get canceled, and yet they still pulled out a decent one here at the end. Hopefully episode 20 will do that as well. What final thoughts do you have?
Final thoughts is this show has been hit and miss as far as episodes that I like. So I can't say don't watch this, but I also can't say do watch it. I'll just say this: make up your own mind. And if you decide you want to watch this, I hope you enjoy it, and just let us know if you come back and you're watching this stuff. Let us what you thought of each episode, because I'm curious to see, because this is one of those shows where you're like, either you really love it or you really don't like it. And it's really hardly in between. I noticed that. It's like, and I'm not sure if it's nostalgia from older people watching it, growing up, and like, oh, there's nothing wrong with this, where, people who just don't care. It's just like, oh, this is stupid, That's your society in a nutshell. But yes, this episode, Demon and Lace, this should have just skipped. You can skip the nightly murders, go right into this.
Nightly Murders is a goofy one. but even the bad ones sometimes are a little bit fun, and I think at least in a lot of the episodes we do get that, and I agree with you totally. So let me close by asking you this final question here. We talked about a few episodes ago how the reboot from about 10-15 years ago failed and failed miserably. Do you think Kolchak could actually be redone in today's terms on television? Because it seems like it's such a good concept, and it seems like it's simple to do, but yet people fail when they reboot all these old series.
It all depends on where it's going to be on, because like sci-fi is usually a hit and a miss, and this would be a sci-fi show. It'd have to be on cable. Like, don't put it on NBC or ABC because it won't survive. They already tried to do reboots of Wonder Woman and this back on NBC back in the day, and they didn't get off the pilot ground. They're canceled within like 1 or 2 episodes. It's with streaming networks right now. Like, you could probably put this on a Netflix, like they do with that show Mindhunter.
Yes.
If give it a Netflix, a background, or Amazon or something. It may not be as what we want it to be, but then again, it's like compared the original stuff isn't that great. So I don't think it really hurt it if you changed it a little bit. The thing is that you got to have the supernatural. Don't give me any preachy stuff. Don't give me
messaging.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't need
a story. Don't be messaging. Yeah.
No. Follow the formula. There's a formula here, and there's also a formula that worked also in the X-Files. Same thing. Stick to that. If you want to do Monster of the Week, go ahead, do Monster of the Week. I don't care. The one thing you got to do though is make sure that Vincenzo knows and it's continuing character growth for him. Not that he's repeating it over and over and over again, because it's like shooting yourself in the foot and expecting a different reaction.
Vincenzo literally is that character that in the 80s everybody likes to go back to the 80s and identify the yelling police chief, whether it's from Lethal Weapon or Beverly Hills Cop or other TV shows. But I go back as far as Vincenzo at least and say, well, it may start with Vincenzo. I mean, we'll have to do a deeper dive to analyze that character at some point. But yeah, I think that's well said there.
They might have started with Superman with Perry White.
Back in the 50s? We'll see. It's possible.
Even before that.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Season 1, Episode 19 of Kolchak the Night Stalker from 1975 on ABC television. Go check it out. Wonderful show. Very groundbreaking. We'll be talking about more reasons why next week with our final episode 20, before we move on to something else. For RDV, myself, Rob here at the Xtreme Movie Show for Xtreme TV Tonight. Thanks for listening. Let us know if you got any feedback about this, or if there's a show, television-wise, you'd like us to cover, because, boy, I tell you, there's so much to cover out there, and finding something fun is half the battle, and something that's interesting, too. And so far, Kolchak's been it. With that, I'd like to say thanks for listening, as always. Stay extreme.
Good night, guys. Or morning.